Greetings, Goshen family and friends. Today I have the privilege again to have Benjamin Rogers. Benjamin is the candidate for the Republican Party for Mayor of Goshen this November. How are you doing? How's the campaign going? Benjamin, welcome again.
Well, thanks for having me back. The campaign's been going great. Been meeting a lot of great people. Going out and door knocking, phone calling, whatever. I've been really impressed with how open and inviting the city's been to this campaign. It's been a tiring process, and I have to admit that I won't be sad when the political aspect of it is over here in about a week and a half. But I can tell you that one thing that I am going to value for a long time is the experience of being able to meet so many people and network with so many people and talk about issues that I think have been ignored for a long time. And that is something I'll treasure for forever.
That's good. Before we go any farther, I'd like to ask you a question that I'm sure that is in a lot of people's minds. Are you a Chinese spy?
Not that I last checked. And it's funny that you mentioned that because I obviously don't look like some of the other candidates on the ballot. And for those that don't know, I was adopted from South Korea when I was a few months old. So the only evidence I have of me ever being in South Korea is like photo albums from foster parents and the like. But it's an interesting question because I actually have gotten that before. It's like, are you an American? It's like, yeah, I'm a United States citizen. I've been here for basically my entire conscious life, and it's I think it's a testament to the greatness of the United States and the openness of our community that at the end of the day it matters, but it doesn't. Yeah. Because what we're here is to talk about issues, and we're all united as American citizens, as Americans, as residents of Goshen, whatever. And that to me is still pretty neat, knowing that we can be united under something like that.
Absolutely. And to me, I mean, when I heard your story, I'm thinking, the what it means for people throughout the world. In this case, somebody here in the States with a heart adopted you and brought you to the United States, a place with opportunities for many people around the world. And I am an immigrant. A lot of people come here for, improving their lives. And your case was very different, but at the same, it shares that story, right? Agreed. And so in a way, you and I have a lot in common.
Yep. We both love this country, and we both, have that background. And then we're united, here in the United States as fellow Americans. And that to me is a beautiful thing. And one, you mentioned, someone wanting to, adopt and bring someone, here and to give them a better life. Is that one thing I didn't really realize until I got older was how expensive that process is, how expensive it is, especially at that time to adopt. And my parents were not wealthy, and I know my my mom to find some money to adopt one of us kids. She sold one of her musical instruments that she had trained to play for years. In another case, they took out a loan from a family member to make sure that they had enough to cover that cost, and that was never something we didn't really ever talk about, but that was something that I realized later was just how intentional that was for them to go through that process, and that's something I've been very grateful for. Yeah. And it's been interesting as I've been phone calling and talking with people. One of the things that's actually come up on the campaign trail, even though it's not a city issue, is the talk about the cost of adoption, the cost of fostering, and whether we can pressure the state to possibly try to alleviate some of that. And I think there's some momentum on that. And that's something I kind of take a bit personal because of that experience. And I'm hopeful that we see some movement towards that direction. So
that's awesome. Let's talk about the Republican Party. Before we came on air, we were talking about, kind of the history of the last, I'm going to say 20, 30 years of the Republican Party and how it is transforming little by little, but it seems like we are at that moment in history where I think there are a lot of opportunities for the Republican Party to identify with this new breed of leaders that are coming, and also engage into with this new group, which is the Hispanics. I interviewed Gina Lichty a couple of days ago, and I asked her the question of, we talk about Goshen growing, and we talked about how much, that the infrastructure needs and housing needs and all that. And I asked her the question of, where do you think this growth is coming from? And she answered, and I think she's right, that this comes from immigration. This comes from people coming to the Goshen area looking for job opportunities. And that itself, immigration, is a topic that divides people. In our community, I think we have opportunities for talking about these subjects. I think that the fact that I am Hispanic, it presents a good opportunity because the way the things are today, it seems like, only certain people are entitled to talk about certain things, which I think is ridiculous personally. But nonetheless, this is our community. How do you think the Republican Party can engage the Hispanic community? There are two people, at least two people in the ticket in the Democratic Party. Sandra McMasters, and we have Richard Aguirre, which he's the clerk treasurer. But we don't have Hispanic people, at least, we used to have one, right? Felipe Merino, who was going to be running for consul at large, but he got out of the ticket. But how do we engage the Hispanic community who actually have some traits and they share some, we share some values, most of it, the value of work, family, the right to life. And, I can give you a list. You mentioned that you have, during your campaign, you've been knocking on some doors and learned that some Hispanics are actually conservatives. But how do we engage into making sure that there's representation on both parties?
Yeah, I think that's a question that basically comes down to you have to talk to people. And when I've talked to people about outreach, and you can divide that into any group, whether it's young people, by ethnicity, whatever, is that a lot of it comes down to you have to go out of your own box that you have almost put yourself into, and you have to be willing to talk to people regardless of where they live, what their background is, or even what you might perceive what their political thought would be. And as a newcomer kind of to the ticket, I was caucused onto this ballot position in August. I've tried my best to reach out to everybody possible, and a lot of that involves just picking up a phone, agreeing to have a cup of coffee, agreeing to meet at someone's place of business, whatever, and not just come in and say, well, I want your vote, or will you join our political party? It's about learning what their concerns are, where you mesh together, where you might have disagreements, and figure out how you can then work together. And I think we would be surprised at how productive that would be if we could all just start doing that again. Because the national political scene, unfortunately, clouds so much of the state and the local. So when people hear the word Democratic Party or they hear the word Republican Party, they instantly go to something specific in their minds, and often that's such a strong feeling. They will shut down looking and talking to candidates that are local. And I think a lot of it, from a Republican standpoint, comes down to we need to do better at talking with people. We need to do better at showing up to things, and we need to be better about making sure that the opportunities, whether it's as a candidate, as a volunteer, whatever, are as open and as inviting as possible. And one thing that I was kind of struck by here recently is all of a sudden I realized that locally, if you want to get involved in your local political scene, it's pretty easy, or at least it's easier than you would initially think. If you want to get involved, I can tell you that if you're Hispanic, if you're white, if you're Asian, whatever, you will have people jumping over backwards to try to find a role for you. Because as communities change, as communities age, a lot of the people that would, for example, work the polls, a lot of the people that would volunteer and run campaigns, they're retiring, or in some cases, unfortunately, passing on. And it's up to us as the next generation of leaders, whether that's by youth or ethnicity, to stand in that gap and start assisting our community. And I think when both sides take a step towards each other, it brings people together in a way that is almost unexpected, and it can happen awfully fast. And my goal, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected to this position, is to not just come in with a preset agenda and be like, well, this is how it's going to be. I want to reach out to people and actually have real conversations, and not just have those for the sake of myself, but for the sake of the community at large. Because if we don't sit down and start having these conversations and bringing more people to the table, we're going to look back in a decade or two and realize that the community is worse off for it, because there's only so long that certain groups of people can almost maintain their control. We have to make sure that the next generation of leadership is ready to take on that challenge.
That's really good. So, if you become Goshen mayor, how do you plan on engaging in reaching out to the Hispanics? And I'm saying this because, again, a lot of people don't feel that they have representation. We only have one person that will be speaking Spanish. If she wins, I'm talking about Sandra Rodriguez McMasters, then we'll have only one person. But yet there's a large population of the area that don't speak English. And what can we do about that?
I think, internally, one thing I've kind of heard in the past is, well, it's difficult to make sure everything's translated because that's a lot. And I think that's, we need to make sure that we don't look at it as an impossible task of being accessible. That's something that we have to look at as a challenge that we can solve.
Yeah.
And I personally, don't speak Spanish. I'm still working on English. But I want to make sure that I am personally available to everybody. And that involves being willing to go to churches. That involves being willing to go to different groups. And knowing that the mayor personally is accessible, I believe can set the tone for the rest of the city government. And it's not, and that is an interesting thing you brought up about the idea of both accessibility and the idea of networking, is that is a complaint or an issue I've heard constantly throughout this, and it's not just the Hispanic community that's dealing with that. There is a feel that's like, well, if you live in some parts of the city, your concerns way more on City Hall than others. And I want to make sure that that's no longer the case. I want to come in and have a complete reset of tone. Everyone matters. It doesn't matter where you live, what your socioeconomic standing is, whatever, or what political connections you have. Everyone's opinion matters. Everyone's issues matter, because everyone's a human being and everyone's valuable. And that to me is incredibly important, because if we don't have that vision and that mentality, that's going to seep into outreach, including to the Hispanic community, and I don't want that to be the case anymore.
Yeah. And please, I apologize if I stay on the subject of racial issues, because again, Goshen is growing. This growth is coming from the Hispanic population, and that seems to be a conversation that a lot of people don't want to really address. Again, I keep hearing the Goshen keeps growing, but I don't hear, why is it growing and where that growth is coming from, and how do we engage this group of people that are coming to the area to work, fleeing from other countries, because again, we look at this country, this beautiful country that is blessed with so much opportunities for everybody, but again, how do we create this flourishing community where everybody gets access to the same, communication rights and all that good stuff. So one more question is, because of the growth, and I look at the paper, and I look at the opinion articles that are in every once in a while, like the Heritage Festival that we had here not too long ago. So people were concerned about the behaviors of the Hispanics, burning tires on the streets and stuff like that, which is a valid point, I think, because again, we are one community, and Hispanics, we have to be respectful of the laws, ordinances, and the way the things used to be. But again, some people feel afraid to even say something because they feel that the pushback is going to be so hard. But yet, I think that part of the democracy is to be able to have a conversation about difficult things to talk about.
Agreed.
But then you just talk about those things. So I was hoping that leadership was going to be writing an article back and saying, yes, you're right, we should look into this and find out what really happened. But that didn't happen. So that I keep seeing that void of leadership into engaging into having these conversations that again are valid concerns, and all that balance. I saw another article not too long ago about, it said something like, we don't need another Mexican restaurant in downtown. And you have to, coming from, Hispanic, I'm like, okay, it could have some validity, but at the same time, look at the growth.
Agreed.
How many Hispanics are coming to the area? How many Hispanic restaurants, and how many more Hispanic restaurants we can support is based on the number of the demographics.
It's a market issue. It's a free market issue.
Correct.
And it's interesting that you brought that up, because I met with someone recently who's a Hispanic business owner, and we were talking about some of the it's not small.
Yeah, it's not.
So when you hear people say, "Oh, we shouldn't have another Mexican restaurant," the market will decide that. That's not up to the government. That's not up to any board or whatever, and that should never, ever be the role of a government entity to decide how many restaurants of a certain kind we should have according to some central plan. Yeah. And so when I hear things
I'm
like
really
that,
glad you just said that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of Hispanic businesses will tell you how difficult it is to go and get all the different permits and hear and know. And I can tell you from my personal experience, that we along with another partner, we were going to be opening a restaurant here in downtown. And I heard it from the person renting the place that they don't want another Mexican restaurant. And so, this is real stuff. And you saying that's huge.
And I can tell you that it's been an issue for a long time. And it seems it's not getting any better. And that hurdle, it's affecting everyone, but I truly feel it's affecting those that are especially, are immigrants, coming here because, they're coming here trying to get a business off the ground. There might be a language barrier. There might be, a cultural barrier. And then when you go in and you see all these processes and the process isn't very clear. You have to go through, planning. Then you have to go through, building. And it can be confusing on the best of days. And it's not an inviting process, but it's like, hey, let me help you get your business off the ground because this is wonderful that you're an entrepreneur and wanting to get this going. When it's not set up in that inviting manner, you wonder, excuse me, how many businesses that we have lost just by them never appearing.
Yeah.
And we talk about, the growth of the community, but that's only going to continue if we have jobs and we have housing. And that immigrant population and people immigrating here and moving here to the city of Goshen, you can't shut them out of that.
Yeah.
And you just can't. And that's been one of my biggest issues in this campaign is trying to break down those barriers. I think a lot of them are simply policy related, and it's a mandate issue from the chief executive, and that would be the mayor.
Okay.
And so my goal with that is to come in and start working through those processes to see where we can make those more accessible and where it isn't as much of a barrier for anyone, regardless of their background, to get a business off the ground, because you can't centrally plan stuff like that. It's not the government's role to necessarily do that.
Yeah.
And it's a concern to me when we start talking in a manner, whether it's conservatives or liberals, when we start talking of like, well, I think this is how it should be, because the market will decide that, and the market is people.
Yeah.
And we sometimes reduce that to well, we like this and we don't like this. That can be dangerous if we allow that thought process to go too far.
Yeah, I agree. I'm so glad you just mentioned that, because I think it's a big issue for at least, again, Hispanics to start joining the Republican ranks, at least openly, because I know there are a lot of Republican Hispanics who are what we say in the closet, because again, there's the pushback from
I found a lot of them going door to door.
And so they're not willing to come forward because of the fear, and that's what I'm thinking. Why are people afraid to say what they think? And I think it's the reflection of everything that has been taking place at the political national stage.
Agreed.
Where people feel that if they say something, then they're going to be persecuted, or they're going to be treated in a way that is disrespectful. In which case, talking to Patricia Garcia, who is running for council at large in Elkhart, she has gone through that in the last one of the events. She just told me that off the record that that she got disrespected. I'm not going to say by who, but some prominent person in the community, because she just is running through the Republican Party. And that is not the United States that, I came to know when I got here. So what is happening with this pushback? Why inclusivity doesn't come in the way of thoughts as well? It's not just the way that you look or whether you have purple hair or whatever. It's what you really think about the country.
I think it's, in some cases, I've looked at it, and I almost get the feeling that to some people, that's the tougher kind of diversity, because that's when you really have to dial down and talk to people on a really deep level about what they believe, what their backgrounds are, and why they believe what they believe. And when you have stereotypes and you really hold on to them, I think that's where you start running into those issues where it's like, for me, I think some people are surprised that I'm the Republican nominee for mayor just because of how I look.
Exactly.
I heard from someone that they were talking to someone who I think was maybe on the fence or maybe was on the other political side, and they're like, well, no, the Republicans aren't gonna vote for Ben because he's ethnically Korean. And I'm like, I won the caucus for this position unanimously.
Yeah.
And I have not gotten any pushback, from that side in regards to that.
And remember what I told you about Diego Morales, Secretary of State. I mean, he openly told me, you know what, who put me here? Really, Hispanics didn't put me here because, we don't engage in voting. It was the Anglo community. So I think that the country is ready for a change in the Republican Party. Because again, there is this new breed of Hispanics who are born here. The second generation, my son is 15 years old. He doesn't have the concerns that people 20 years ago had. He's looking at the country the way that any other American is. So he happens to be Hispanic. He happens to speak Spanish, but he doesn't have the same mentality. So how are we recruiting this new generation to the Republican Party? And at least what I'm concerned is to have representation on both parties.
Agreed.
Because again, a democracy requires that. We're not, it's like uniparty like in China where there's only one party. We need to have a representation in both parties.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to it being issue based again, because at least from my perspective, I'm still in my 20s barely, is that a lot of my peers, regardless of background, have almost been pushed away from being interested in politics, and interested in history, and interested in government, because they see it as almost a clown show at this point. There's no talking about issues.
Yeah, right.
And when it's all about like who got what soundbite on what cable news station, it drives those people away. And so I think, at least my hope is that a refocus on actual concrete issues that we deal with, whether it's the social issues or the fiscal issues or whatever, a focus on issues again.
Yeah.
I think that's what will bring people back. Because once you get rid of the political games and you start talking about this is why we're involved in this party, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, whatever, and these are the reasons why we want you to be involved, that's different than the emotional aspect that's driving, I think, a lot of people out of politics. And you look at it just from a civic engagement perspective, people around here are starting to not vote.
Yeah.
Turnout is going lower and lower and lower. And that to me is quite sad, because typically when I talk to people and I ask them, like, so why aren't you interested in voting? And I ask that from a completely non-judgmental way, because I'm actually interested in learning why.
Yeah.
A lot of times their answer kind of comes down to, well, it's just a mess and I don't want to be a part of it. And to me that's sad, because the only way for our representative democracy to continue is for people to be involved.
Yeah.
And for people to take at least some interest every general election and every primary season, and take that few minutes to go vote for a candidate, or take a few minutes and look them up on the internet to see what they actually believe. And I think that's where any community, and especially the Hispanic community, can really take a step in securing liberty and freedom for the next generation.
Correct.
And I'm hopeful, because I'm beginning to see signs of people re-engaging, that refocus on issues and that refocus on concrete things that are right in front of us will bring people back to the table again. And maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I think that there's still time to get people involved on that level.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that we can safely say that we need to get our country back on track.
Agreed.
We talk about the major KPIs, inflation, the national debt. Let's talk about the political turmoil. We can talk about the wars right now in Israel, now Ukraine, the wars that we've been involved into for the last 20 years, and what that has created. The environment that has created. I think that we need to all come to the center. We need to make hard choices as a country. And only comes through, fiscal responsibility. I mean, how much more are we going to be, inflating the economy by creating fake money, printing money? And this is a topic I know that a lot of people don't feel like we have power to change on. But it comes back to the local level,
It
right?
does.
How our taxes are being used efficiently. how we can make sure that we have good savings for the rainy days. Which that's another question I wanted to ask you. What do you foresee the economy to do in the next I want to say the next couple of years? I was mentioning again during my interview with Gina Lichty that back in 2008 when there was the recession, there was a big highlight into the Elkhart County because there seems to be a connection between what happens in Elkhart County to the national economy. And Obama came here, he was campaigning, he was making a point of that. And so, wherever this part of the country goes economically, that's where the nation goes. And we have seen a huge dramatic slowdown in production of RVs for sure. The economic downturn that, now they don't call it recession. They actually changed the definition of that. That used to be 2 different quarters of negative growth. Now that's not it. They changed it on Wikipedia, but it feels like a recession already. I'm telling you because of the nature of my work. I kind of live closely to companies, and I know the heartbeat is we're not hiring right now. Actually, we're trying to not replace people that we lose, and so there is no growth. At least I want to tell you on the Hispanic side, people are becoming desperate. There are not enough jobs like they used to be a year and a half ago. And I've told you the different stories that I heard from people, where they can't find a job, so they move to different states. I've lost friends that have moved from this area to different states looking for jobs. So it might not be on the news, but it's on the street. It's real. And so how that's going to affect the city's economy, how is that going to affect our budget? I mean, what do you foresee?
I think that's a good example of why you have to be careful with any municipality's budget. And looking back to 2000, the 2008 recession, 2007, 2008 recession, Elkhart County, and I know specifically Elkhart County was very much caught in the lurch when it came to their overall budget. The rainy day fund was not where it should have been for any kind of economic downturn. And we had seen these before because we are fairly reliant on certain kinds of manufacturing industries. And so I think that has been a wake-up call to the other government entities, including Goshen, to make sure that you don't overspend and you don't go too far with it. But that temptation is always there because especially when you have a large rainy day fund or you have a surplus, it can be very tempting to say, well, this is this cool project over here and we need to do this now. And we can dip into the rainy day fund and it'll be fine because the economy is always going to be great. It's been great for the last several years. And my concern with that mentality is that can very easily spiral to, well, we did this project over here. Well, let's do this fun project over here and this fun project over here. And all of a sudden you've drained your rainy day fund and then the shoe drops and the economy collapses and you're left in the lurch. Personally, I really do not know where the economy is going to go from here. It's been a constant concern regarding diversification of our industry because we are very heavily reliant on the RV industry, which has been a great blessing to our community because that is a supply of manufacturing jobs that most communities have lost completely. And in our case, it's typically grown. And so I think we have to be careful not to discount the benefits of that, but at the same time understand that with that comes the risk of it heavily affecting
dependency on the
exactly.
business.
And my concern as well comes with, you mentioned the inflation, is that when we talk about raising fees on a city level, and we talk about, maybe a food and beverage tax and things like that, is that it's often talked about in a way like, well, everything's still great. I know personally my grocery bill has gone up heavily, and I can't imagine what that's like for a larger family. And we have to be very careful with how we approach things like that while we're undergoing inflation like we are, while we're undergoing interest rates where they are currently. And my concern is sometimes government, because of its inherent quasi-stability, sometimes forgets what's going on the ground. And that's one thing I never want to get disconnected from.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's an interesting and difficult subject to talk about, especially in the environment that we're living today. Are you hopeful of the future of Goshen?
I am. I think Goshen is a community that has an absolute ton of potential, and that has been one of the things is I've talked about things I want to fix. I've talked about issues that we're facing, but I've always talked about that in a positive way, because if we know what we're facing, we can try to fix it. And if we just bury our head in the sand, then we're not making anything better. We have a responsibility to improve what we have. And I think Goshen is, as a community, it is growing. We have a ton of entrepreneurial spirit here, especially within the Hispanic community. And we need to make sure the government never tamps that down. Government needs to get out of the way, needs to allow private business to flourish. And by private business, that's the people. Yeah. And because sometimes when we talk about business, we think of these ivory towers, skyscrapers with a bunch of rich guys standing at the top of it. Business around here can be one person, with a food stand, one person with a shop where they hire, two friends to work part time. That's business, and we need to make sure that government never gets in the way of that. I'm hopeful for our community. I feel like there's a lot of untapped potential, and there's people waiting to invest their time and energy into this city if they're allowed to do it. And my goal would be to untap that, because a lot of people will talk about government creating jobs, and you'll see the politicians get out there and
take credit, right?
Exactly, take the credit and stand there for the photo op. And I'm willing to do some of that, but at the end of the day, it's not me doing it. It's just us getting out of the way and encouraging people with those ideas to set forth and make their lives better. And that, to me, when you still have that spirit within the community, when you still have solid churches, where you still have solid family units, where you still have people that are willing to risk everything to start their own business, you still have hope, and the community is better for it.
Yeah. One more question. It's a delicate one. Seems to me like the Republican Party is a party that sticks to believing in God. It seems, at least on at the big political stage, it seems like on the left, it has left all these people of faith kind of out of it. At least that's how it feels. Do you believe in God?
I do. I'm a born-again Christian. I attend Wakarusa Bible Baptist Church in Wakarusa, and my faith is important to me. I respect everyone else's opinions. I respect everyone else's faith, and part of my belief is that government isn't here to mandate one way or the other. It's to respect everyone's religion, everyone's belief system. But personally, I am a Christian.
Okay. And how are you going to be spending the rest of these days before the elections? What are your plans? Are you going to be pushing, ending, finishing hard?
Yep, we're pushing all the way to the finish line. Door to door, we have a meet and greet this Saturday at Embassy Coffee. It's open to everybody.
Okay, good. Well, tell us about it.
Yeah, that's from, let me make sure I got the time right in my head, 10 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. So you can get your morning coffee there. We'll have that provided. It's open to anybody and everybody that wants to come.
At the Embassy Cafe.
Embassy Coffee here right on Main Street. And
that Embassy Cafe was on the news actually during the COVID thing, because they dared to open, which is another subject we can talk about, the response for the COVID thing. But anyway, so go ahead and keep.
Yeah, it's been a good experience working with them and working with a lot of other businesses, and they've been gracious enough to allow us to have that meet and greet. So a lot of the other Republican candidates will be there as well, aside from me. So it's like, if you haven't met some of them yet or just want to have a conversation again, a lot of us are going to be there open for that. We're going to keep on hitting the doors. We're going to keep on making the phone calls. We have mailers going out, more letters, everything that we can do to try to get the message out, because it's difficult for me to try to get over. I've always worked behind the scenes in politics, and it's like, man, it feels almost kind of weird to see your face on stuff and get the message out. And finally, it dawned on me: if I don't do that, if I don't do that, it shows that I'm not really interested in the position. So I'm trying to hit every aspect possible to show that this is serious. We want to help people. We want this position because we think we can do good. And that, to me, is the main message. So we're hitting every aspect possible. And the response from the community has been very positive. And people are interested. People are interested in the idea of a change. And that's been one thing that I've struggled to almost put into words of like, what are they looking for? Because people say, well, we're interested in change. And you ask them, like, well, what change?
Yeah.
And it's almost just the spirit of change. And I think what they're looking for is a refocus on the meat and potatoes issues that are right in front of them, whether that's cost of living, whether that's housing, jobs, infrastructure, the very boring things. They're looking for a return to that. Some neighborhoods are looking for attention from the city when it comes to code enforcement, when it comes to just basic essential services that they feel like maybe they've been pushed aside. And I think there's communities that are like, well, we want to get involved. Where's the outreach? And so I think there's this spirit of change, but I don't want to come in and just be the candidate that, throws a stick of dynamite through the door and wipes my hands like, well, we changed everything. It has to be systematic, it has to be careful, and it has to be measured. Because I have great respect for this office and what it represents. So that's been an interesting aspect of this campaign, is how energetic people are about this election. Because typically it's very difficult to get people interested in a local city election, and this time feels different. And I'm not quite sure why that is, but I'm excited to see where it leads this November.
Well, that's great. I really want to thank you because, since the very first time we talked, you have made me feel like I can tell you what I really think. And, some of the things that we have talked off the air are difficult because I know they could be divisive. And some of the things that we talked about today, some of them obviously represent my opinion. I don't speak for the whole community, but I do know that there are opportunities for engaging with the Hispanic community that is conservative, that are not really decided. They haven't really decided to engage because they haven't found a home, because they don't really belong to the left, and they don't really feel like they're welcome on the right. And so it's, there's this group of people in the middle that I know, have friends who are pastors, people, Hispanic, most of us, have either we are Catholics or we're Christian and we believe in God, like we just talked about. And so there's that opportunity to engage the Hispanic community, again, the largest demographic group growing in the area. And I think that that's going to be key for any candidate, Democrat or Republican, to engage with that group. We have a lot of voters there, so a lot is at stake. So thank you so much for being open-minded and having real conversation and engaging in good conversation, and for being here again. I really wish you the best. You seem to be very energetic. I know it's going to take every bit of your energy to do this work. If you get it, and I think you'll be doing great.
So, well, thank you. It's always great to be here in the studio with you, and it's good to have real conversations. And I hope that can continue, because that's the only way the community is going to stay together, and that's the only way it's going to grow. So thanks for what you're doing to facilitate those conversations, and let's stay in touch, because this is something that we're all going to have to do together if we're going to grow this community.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Family, friends from Goshen, Indiana, there you have it. Benjamin Rogers, he's running for mayor in Goshen. The elections are on November 7th, but I believe early voting has started officially, right?
It has. If you're interested in early voting in Goshen, it's First Presbyterian Church on Lincoln, so just a little ways down from the studio here. And Saturday early voting has actually started as well. So for all the exact times on that, because there's also early voting going on in some of the other towns and cities, you can go to the Elkhart County Clerk's Office website, elkhartcountyclerk.com, and you can either look up that information directly on there, and they're also very responsive via phone and email. But First Presbyterian Church here in Goshen, typically from 8 to 4 on a weekday and 8 to 5 on a Saturday. It's very quick and easy to get in and out there. I've already early voted, and I was in and out of there in about 2 minutes.
Oh, good.
So it's a very easy system to utilize. But if you want to vote on Election Day, as is tradition, November 7th, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Excellent. Thank you again. I am Miguel Santiago. Please don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube channel. Follow us here on Facebook. Click the like button and share this content so our community knows Benjamin Roger, what he thinks, who he is. And don't forget to vote. So again, Miguel Santiago, this is the Goshen Chronicles. See you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.